A racism row erupts on Australian football pitches. Champion Aboriginal sportsman Adam Goodes is booed from coast to coast and forced to withdraw from a game. Do the jeers reveal a nation of bigots and boors? Or is Australia being forced to confront prejudice? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Adrian Finnegan. Disgraceful, frightening, outdated and flawed. That's how Sydney SWANS chairman Andrew Pridham described the attacks on club legend Adam Goodes. The Aussie Rules star, voted Australian of the Year in 2014, was forced to withdraw from Saturday's game after being abused by fans. The controversy began in 2013 when a 13-year-old girl called him an ape.
You know, come to the boundary line and to hear a 13-year-old girl call me an ape, and it's not the first time on a footy field I've been referred to as a monkey or an ape. It was shuddering. I turned around and when I saw it was a young girl and I thought it was 14, that was my initial thought. I was just like, really? I was just like, how could that happen?
Well, all players suffer abuse from rival fans, but the attacks on Goodes have triggered a debate that's gone well beyond sport. Two leading newspapers, The Age and the Sydney Morning Herald, wrapped their Saturday editions with a poster asking readers to join the campaign #IStandWithAdam. The real question here is Australia finally being forced to confront racism? In a moment, we'll ask our panel, but first, Al Jazeera's Florence Louis reports from Sydney.
Anticipation and excitement as Sydney Swans fans stream into the stadium for an Australian Football League match. But there's also disappointment, knowing one of the team's players won't be taking part.
I think booing and cheering is part of the game, but it seems pretty obvious that people are having a go at Goodsy, you know, part of what he's been and what he's done.
Goodsy is a nickname for Adam Goodes, an Indigenous Australian and a star footballer. He's on leave, stressed out by a controversy that started 2 years ago when a teenaged opposition fan called him an ape. Goodes said that was racist. Ever since, the boos have been getting louder every time he steps on the field.
The constant booing of Adam Goodes has not only driven him to take an indefinite break from the game, but it's also ignited a debate on race issues here in Australia.
His supporters say he's being targeted because he took a stand, and the usual taunts that happen in sport are hiding racist attitudes. Outside the stadium, the show of support for him was clear. His jersey sold out fast. This weekend, players from other sports plan to show their support for Goodes in various ways. But there are some who think Goodes is being sensitive.
Adam Goodes has got to stop looking like a sook and stop making it about him in this sense, and also he should stop trying to play the victim.
And others who think jeering is part of sport.
I don't know, I think they just, media maybe blew it out of proportion, and I think they didn't make it so big. It's happened forever and in every sporting code.
Whether the Goodes controversy is about sport or something more, many say racism is an issue in Australia. In 2008, the government apologised for some of its worst abuses of Indigenous people. But the Prime Minister who delivered that apology has admitted achievements since have been meagre. As for Goodes fans, they say they just want to see him back on the pitch.
All right, let's bring in our guests for today's programme. From Sydney, we're joined by Matt de Groot, sports reporter and radio host at Nova. From Darwin, Charlie King, sports broadcaster and human rights advocate. And also in Sydney, Kirsty Parker, co-chair of the National Congress of Australia's First Peoples. Matt, let's start with you first. We're a global show on a global channel. Until just a few moments ago, many of our viewers will never have heard of Adam Goodes. Who is he?
He is certainly the most talked about, most divisive figure in Australia at the moment, and from a sports point of view, it is phenomenal to see where we are at the moment. As has been mentioned already on this program, he is one of the greats of this sport, which is easily the biggest football code in Australia. Often up to 90,000 people going to a week in, week out match gives you an idea of the kind of size of this sport. For Adam Goodes, he's been one of the greatest. He's 35 years of age, so he's certainly not young. He's been around for a long time. He's twice won what's called the Brownlow Medal, which is the award that goes to the best player in the game for that year. He's made the All-Australian side, he's made the All-Indigenous side. He has done everything that can be done in this sport, plus been named Australian of the Year in 2014, transcending his successes from the sporting field to beyond, but also transcending his message of racial inequality or racial equality. And that's where this is all stemmed. He is a man who is extremely outspoken. He's brilliant on the field. He's outspoken off it. And as you've seen now, he's outspoken on it as well. And that's where this line has become blurred.
All right, so Matt, let's get to the nub of this. Is this happening to him because of his stance against racism, or just because people don't like him as a player? They think that he's got an attitude.
That is your million-dollar question right there. I was at the game on Saturday in Sydney. I was one of 38,000 people in Sydney who went. I don't usually go to a Sydney Swans game of a regular season fixture, but I, like many, wanted to go to show Adam and to show the game and to show Australia that this isn't something that is tolerated. It's certainly not something that is an issue. And his playing number is number 37. In the third quarter, in the 7th minute, everyone in that stadium stood and applauded as part of the movement to show him that, mate, trust us, we are on your side. What I think has happened here is, here's a player who, as mentioned, a couple of years ago was involved in a very public issue with a 13-year-old girl. That started a very strange conversation. Then there was an incident earlier this season where he did an Aboriginal tribal war dance during the Indigenous round towards an opposing group of supporters. It was seen, and it's an aggressive looking dance without doubt, but he says it was cultural and tribal and something that he believed in, and you cannot doubt him for that. However, it did rub a lot of people the wrong way and it did look aggressive. His reaction, combined with the fact that it looked like it was a very inciting style of move, has turned it to Adam Goodes versus AFL teams. And the booing that has come, which has been resounding, it's two questions. Is it because he's Indigenous and an athlete, or is it because he's very good and by booing he reacts? And as a supporter, when you go to a game, you have the right to voice your opinion. When you go to a game, you want to do your bit to help your team, and if that means putting one of the best players from the opposing team off, however you can do it, be it booing, not because it's racist, not because it's race-based, not because you're trying to be racist, but you're trying to impact an opposing player, therefore you're booing. That's the question that we're at the moment. That's all right. Are people booing because he's Indigenous, or are people booing because it's effective?
Let's bring in Charlie King then and see what he makes of that. Charlie in Darwin, is Goodes playing the victim here? Has he been unnecessarily provocative?
No, he's not playing the victim at all, and I disagree about the debate around whether this is a racist matter or not regarding Adam Goodes. I think we've moved away from that point. I think we've moved further down the track where we're now talking about how do we deal with racism in Australia. It's no longer a discussion about whether Adam Goodes is being racially taunted or not. I think that's an established fact. The support that I've heard for Adam Goodes over the last few days has just been incredible. Australians, I think, have voted very strongly here. I would suggest that 80% of Australians are supporting Adam Goodes here. There's a massive swing behind Adam Goodes here, and we see it all the time. We hear the discussions about it, and certainly the mail I get, people contacting me, would outnumber those that are against Adam Goodes at about, 8 out of every 10. So massive support for Adam Goodes, and I think the discussion has to be about what do we do with racism in Australia? I think we accept that we've got a problem with it. It's been here for a long time. It's been just burbling along under the surface. This has brought it to the fore. It's popped its ugly head up, and we need to have a discussion about it. The Prime Minister of Australia has spoken strongly about the need to do something about it. The Leader of the Opposition, the same, and high-profile Australians everywhere are saying, let's do more about this. Let's address this issue of racism once and for all. All right. I'm pleased we're at that point now.
I know Kirsty's waiting to get in on this. Kirsty, I'll come to you in a moment, but I just want to go back to Matt for a moment on that. I saw you shaking your head there, Matt. Swans chairman Andrew Pridham said the Swans' position on this matter is very clear. You cannot be a little bit racist. If you boo Adam Goodes, you unequivocally know that this behaviour is hurtful and discriminatory. There is no excuse, none.
It has become, because of Adam Goodes' comments, because of comments like the Sydney Swans, it has turned that the booing is racist, and that comment there that it has now been established that it's racist is putting the cart before the horse. In sport, there are villains. That's what makes sport fantastic, and looking purely from an Australian point of view, in cricket, to try to get it as global as I can, players like Stuart Broad, the English cricketer, get booed Australia-wide. There are athletes who, regardless of race, get booed because they're good, because they do things that incite a crowd, the crowd reacts, and that is the battle that's had. That's not because it's racist. People have been booed regardless of race, regardless of gender, regardless of anything. It's a crowd's prerogative to boo, and that's what has turned here. It's all of a sudden it has been deemed, if you boo, it's race-based, because Adam Goodes has commented on it. Now, the fact that he has, granted, you now have to accept that it hurts him. You do, and so you can't do it. But to say that you said 80%, which means 20% make it race-based, that's ridiculous. That is absurd. I don't for a second accept that 80% of people who go to a sporting event and boo are not racist, therefore 20% are. I think 95% of those who boo are just doing it because that's what you can do in sport. That's what makes sport great.
Charlie, a very quick response from you if you can, because I want to get Kirsty in here. So.
Yeah, sure. You misunderstood. 80% of Australians support Adam Goodes is the point I'm making. 20% are undecided on this. And the booing is not the issue. It's the comments that are made. It's the comments, the ape, the comparing to King Kong, the zoo, and all of those other comments is what the issue is here. People boo at the footy. Everyone accepts that. We understand that.
Very loud comments.
Sorry?
Three very loud comments, which everyone has denounced. 100% have denounced. Those three comments have been held up as the banner for all the booing, which is, I think, incorrect as well.
All right. Look, guys, let me bring in Kirsty then. Kirsty, are Australia's Indigenous people being overly sensitive? I don't think so, but I have to ask the question.
No, I don't think so. I think that people have been booing Adam for a variety of reasons, but racism is certainly one of those reasons, where people have been opportunistic and have taken the cover of this is just sport. The other thing is Adam Goodes isn't being booed just because he is Aboriginal by those people, you know, that proportion of the crowds that are racist. He's being booed because of the stance he's taken on racism. He's called racism out in very kind of tricky circumstances. I think Matt referred to that incident a couple of years ago where he was abused, had a racial slur thrown at him from the grandstand. He was unaware of the age of the person that had done it, but he called it out. He then treated her pretty gently and encouraged people to support her through the process, but reserved his right to call out racism where it happens. And I have to say, I think the booing, the incessant booing, is a problem, as are the comments. The thing is, you know, Adam is outspoken on racism. He says that racism exists, and I'm here to tell you racism does exist. I saw something on social media today that said the new racism is to deny that there is racism, and I think that's pretty pertinent to this. The sort of message that we're trying to say is we're not saying that everyone who's ever booed at a football match or other sporting game is racist, but this has crossed a line. If, you know, people don't have racism kind of fueling their behaviour, they have nothing to worry about. We're not talking about them, but we are talking to them and saying, do you want to provide cover and haven for people that are racist? Okay. Of course, this has turned into a, you know, a kind of a terrible snowball, and we do find ourselves in a situation now where people will say, but can't we just do as we've done before? Can't we just, you know, boo people and have villains and have heroes and what have you? But we have crossed a line here, and we need to question the behaviour of people.
All right, let's listen to the man himself speaking 2 years ago after that incident we mentioned earlier in the programme when a young girl called Goodes an ape. He told the media following that racism is an issue that needs to be confronted by everyone in Australia.
I don't think I've ever been more hurt by someone calling me a name than I was last night. Not because of what was said, but because where it came from. A 13-year-old girl, and it just hit me that, you know, it's not a Collingwood issue, it's not an AFL issue, it's a society issue, and it's an issue about what are our parents teaching our kids.
Kirsty, the guy who was ejected from Perth's Oval last Sunday for allegedly shouting or making racist remarks directed at Goods, said that it was an overreaction and that the current uproar was political correctness gone mad. I mean, it's clear, if nothing else at the moment, Australia is being forced to take a long, hard look at itself, isn't it, and to confront decades of racism. It
is, and I think it's a good outcome from an unfortunate situation. I'm not glad this has happened, but it has happened, and we need to talk about these things. The fact that a lot of people, or some people, seem to be very sensitive about even having the conversation says how tricky this is going to be, but that doesn't mean that we don't talk about it. I also want to address something that Matt had said earlier about the dance, or the war dance, that Adam performed, and he said that it seems very aggressive and scary. And the question that's being raised within Aboriginal communities is, what is scarier, a symbolic performance of culture and cultural pride, or the idea that we have racism in Australia and there are very deep impacts amongst Aboriginal people of that racism, or that we can't even have a conversation about it? That's kind of scary. I'd also draw a comparison with the Māori people performing a haka, which on the face of it is it's a declaration of, we're tough, we're cultural, we're strong, but people don't seem to have the same problem with that as they do with the dance that Adam has done, and now other players are saying if they weren't performing it before, they will do so. This is not a scary thing. It is an expression of pride, and that obviously does jar with some people.
Matt, I see you shaking your head.
But surely you can understand the difference between the haka, which is a pre-announced, pre-declared action of battle against a combatant that everyone knows is going on and everyone knows why, compared to what Adam Goods did, which, and again, I have absolutely no drama with the fact that he did the dance. I think that is his choice. However, he did it towards an opposing group of spectators in an action that symbolised throwing spears towards a group of spectators who weren't in any way expecting it. You can see why it looks aggressive in comparison to something like the haka, which is a pre-announced intent of battle. What Adam Goods did looked insightful. Even if it wasn't, it did look it.
Kirsty?
Well, it certainly wasn't, and the explanation that has been given, it wasn't the first time that had been performed. It had actually been performed at some other high-profile games as well. But we're not talking about something that came out of the blue. This was an Indigenous round. It was an Indigenous player expressing Indigenous, his Aboriginal cultural pride. And I just wonder if people can't, when there is some sort of analysis in the clear light of day, what was this that Adam was doing? And people are still taking exception to it. They know the story behind it. They know that no offence was intent, that it was this expression of pride and, athletic finesse and all these things, and yet they're still hanging on to it. They're also hanging on to something that, as we know, was a tricky circumstance. He, in terms of the young girl that abused him, he then encouraged people to be supportive of her, didn't want her charged, and, was obviously, being very careful about situation, and yet people are still holding it against him. All right,
I want to broaden this out slightly if I can. Charlie, I know you want to come in, but please do. But I want to talk more about Australia's attitude to its Indigenous people at the moment. Does the passion of the discussion that we're having here right now indicate perhaps a deeper wound in Australian society? It was only in 1973, remember, that the White Australia policy was finally abandoned. There is within living memory a clear, institutionalised, officially sanctioned legacy of racism in which the country's Indigenous people were not treated or accepted as fully equal.
Adam Goods is a hero for Indigenous Australians. He's the highest profile AFL footballer. He has called out against racism, and since then he has been targeted. The booing has just gone on and on and on. I mean, it is unacceptable behaviour, and we know that. Adam Goods confronted a 13-year-old girl in the crowd. He didn't go to her deliberately. He went to where the racial taunts were coming from, and then when he got there, arrived, he saw a 13-year-old girl. He dealt with that issue very, very well, and a lot of people are still hanging on to the 13-year-old girl who was pointed out by Adam Goods. Aboriginal Australians are concerned about the hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of 13-year-old Aboriginals who hold Adam Goodes in the highest possible regard. He is their hero. He's the person we want to emulate, and he's being chopped off at the knees.
Charlie,
we just have to...
Charlie, is this torrent of abuse that you talk about, the jeers in city after city, is it evidence that Australia has failed to move on from the White Australia policy, which is still within living memory?
Well, I think it is. I agree with that. But there's a small section that's actually doing this. I mean, it's not everyone in the crowd that's actually doing it. As I said earlier on, I think the majority of Australians believe that this issue is, you know, it's run its distance and we need to move on and have a discussion now about how we deal with racism here. But there's still that left over from those years gone by, and people are uncomfortable with it. Well, they're going to have to be uncomfortable because the decision will come from discussion. We need to have more discussion.
Matt, going back to something you were saying a little earlier, another quote here from SWANS chairman Andrew Pridham, who said that paying $30 to come to a game of football doesn't give you the right to humiliate, to taunt, to bully, to racially vilify anybody, and we won't accept it, neither will the game. I mean, you were saying that the booing, the jeering, the chanting, that it doesn't matter which sport, it happens everywhere. It's part of the atmosphere. It's what you go for. And if you stamp that out, it's going to make sport very dull indeed in terms of a spectator sport, isn't it?
And it offends me, to be completely honest with you, as someone who attends sport and loves the passion about sport, to suggest that any booing that I do of an athlete on a playing field may be racially motivated, including with Adam Goodes. There is a host of Indigenous players, in fact players of all ethnic backgrounds who play sport in Australia, be it in Australian rules football or other codes, who don't get booed. And similarly, if Adam Goodes was not on the playing field, he's not walking down the street and being booed. He's not getting up to public speak and being booed. This is something that is purely happening in the context of a sporting event and crowds reacting in the context of a sporting crowd. This isn't something that's happening to all Indigenous players or outside the field. What's very sad is that whatever has happened in Adam Goodes' 35 years to now makes him sensitive to the fact that if there is booing, that is where it comes from. However, as a sports fan and as a lover of the passion of crowds, you can't be asking fans not to react for fear that any player is going to respond based on something that is not the intention of the boo.
All right, let's try to end on a positive note. We saw what happened on Saturday. He wasn't there, but there was this massive outpouring of support for him. Kirsty, the passion of the debate that we're having here on this show that's going on at the moment in Australia, doesn't it show that far from lagging behind in the debate about race, that Australia is actually moving forward?
Oh, it certainly heartens myself and other Aboriginal people to have seen the response that we've seen, you know, in football stadiums in the last couple of days, but also, you know, everywhere on social media. Yesterday I was part of a group of 150 organisations in the space of a couple of days that said, we want to sign up to a statement that says we need to do more to stamp out racism in sport and everyday life. That is pretty remarkable. The sorts of comments that we've had saying, look, you know, it's not to say that everyone is racist, but we certainly have a problem with racism in Australian society and we need to tackle it. That's fantastic. And also people are, I think, starting to dig a little deeper and say, okay, how does racism manifest itself in Australia? And we know that it plays a role in virtually all of the statistics that face Aboriginal people. You talked about, you know, the White Australia policy. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people weren't counted in the national census, so the reckoning of the population until 1967. We know that racism also plays a role in high incarceration rates, terrible statistics around health, housing, education, employment, infant mortality, all of these things. That's not to say that racism is the only problem here, but it is a very big contributing factor. And if we can start to have these conversations, and if we can have people saying, look, there are some things here that I didn't realise before, but I'm prepared to listen and to understand, I think that's a wonderful thing. I think we're seeing quite remarkable acts of decency. People are saying, I might have been before, but now that I know that it's particularly hurtful, now that I know it's quite inflammatory in this situation, I will refrain. And I applaud people that are prepared to take that sort of step rather than hold blindly to the idea that they can boo incessantly.
Kirsty, many thanks. I know Charlie and Matt, you want to get back in there. We are unfortunately out of time. Thank you all for being with us on today's Inside Story. Matt de Groot in Sydney, Charlie King in Darwin, and Kirsty Parker also in Sydney. Thank you for watching. We're always keen to hear from you. If there's anything you want to tell us about our debate here today, if you want to get your opinion in, then please do get in touch with us via our programme page at aljazeera.com. You can post your comments at facebook.com/AJ Inside Story, or you can tweet us at AJ Inside Story. From me, Adrian Finnegan, and the whole team here in Doha, thanks for watching. We'll see you again. Bye for now.